violence against Native Hawaiian and Indigenous feminine people here in Hawaii, and it's also part of the national, international missing and murdered Indigenous relatives movement. Um, on top of that, I also serve as a policy and research specialist for a nonprofit called Pohana o Na Wahine, Pillars of Women, the first federally funded domestic violence resource center for Native Hawaiians. Um, upon my moving home and during my dissertation phase, I co-founded and serve as an executive director for a nonprofit called Kamawai Lualani. It's an original place name for the island of Kauai. And we're a nonprofit focused on grassroots community education, cultural perpetuation, and public arts. Yeah. Mahalo for having me. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Hi, I'm Yavi Olivera Guerrero, and I am a 2013 alumni, McNair alum, and I am now a vocational counselor consultant and recently took on, I'm in training, I'm gonna be taking over this really overwhelming position as the ability to work evaluation specialist. And pretty much I've taken a lot of roles, and I think I'm a good person to be on this panel because I have put a toe in academia, took out a toe out of academia, put another toe, and then I'm like, you know what? No academia for me. So if you're someone who is on the fence, I'm going to tell you the long journey of kind of trying to figure it out. And I think I found a good balance now. But I, started in McNair and I did a lot of parent scaffolding, relationships and how it affects children's stress. Then I dabbled into development, evaluation, and then dissemination of evidence-based programs and specifically Latino communities in regards to stress, in regards to obesity. And then I did a complete switch over to domestic violence. Did some community research in Yakima and loved that part of my job. And then I dabbled at WSU Extension and that was great, but I wasn't there very long because I realized it just wasn't a good fit for my life goals and life balance. And so then now I'm being a vocational counselor where I still get to do prevention, which is where I got my degree, and I graduated from WSU, and I got all three of my degrees from WSU, which is, a lot of people tell you not to do that, but I'm going to tell you, it just all depends. That's going to be a big thing for what I'm going to say. But so I got to make really good networks. And so I would find myself applying everything I've learned in not just my research, but in real life, and then in a career that it has nothing to do with my PhD, but I'm still applying what I learned in my PhD and kind of flexing muscles when I need to, when I talk to lawyers and other medical doctors. So yeah, I'm excited to talk to you guys, and thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you, Yadi.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rosalinda Godinez. I'm joining in from Cleveland, Ohio. I graduated from WSU in 2014 with a degree in sociology, and I was part of the 2011-2012 McNair cohort. I went straight from undergrad to a PhD at UC Berkeley, and I received a PhD in education May 2022. And then straight from my PhD, I am in now my current position, which is a postdoctoral researcher at Cleveland State University at the Center for Urban Education. I think that my kind of the core of my story is going to be really about how I've been, taking things slow. It's been quite the journey, but I am a very committed researcher. I love doing research. McNair was the beginning of research for me. I did my project that focused on notions of parental involvement and the meaning of that for farm workers. And then in my PhD, I did a dissertation that was more ethnographic, which is why it took me so long to graduate with my PhD. that documented farm working women's education and how they live and work in agriculture. So it all is a continuation of my McNair project and also my life story. So also embedded within that. So I wanted to continue to focus more on participatory action research, which is what moved me to my current position as a postdoctoral researcher. Currently, I am part of a large project that implements participatory action research in schools, in particular with youth and teachers. So I work with high school teachers to strategize how it is that they can bring in research into their classroom setting in ways that's embedded within their subjects, and in ways that we try not to add more work to their load because they're already overburdened in many ways. So I'm also responsible for qualitative data collection. So I do a lot of ethnographic work. So I implement my own training in ethnography in the project. I do observations in classrooms, document what it is that teachers are doing. And I also have co-created resources with teachers to think about how it is that we can, create lesson plans and PowerPoints for teachers to just make it easier for teachers to teach participatory action research in their classroom. And we have a website, if you're interested, it's skypar.org or schoolbasedypar.org. And it's really a resource that we're trying to really create for teachers to have access to. So I'll share more about that. And I'm also very happy to be here and share this space with you all.
Thank you all. It's great to have you back and joining us and sharing about those journeys. So let's go ahead and dive deeper into that. So Nikki, we'll go ahead and start with you. Talk to us about your academic and career trajectory, from undergrad to grad to what you're doing now.
Yeah, so like I said, born and raised on the island of Kauai, K through 12 public school student, first generation college student from a low income background, and I didn't know what I was doing. Washington State University was actually the only school I applied to. And I told myself when I was graduating high school, if I didn't get in, then I would just go to the community college here and then figure my life out. But I did get in. And so I was just like, I guess I'll want to go to Washington State University. So little 18-year-old me went to Pullman, Washington, had no idea what I was getting myself into. Experienced a lot of culture shock, but a lot of academic shock as well. Just realizing, I think for the first time, I always say that's the first time I ever felt unintelligent in school. I felt like really ill prepared for college level education. And so I was like really looking for somewhere I could find a home there. And a lot of that was for my own retention. I knew that if I didn't find a community that I would have dropped out. And so, I kind of went through kind of a rocky road with the first few years of my undergraduate. And I was in TRIO, Student Support Services. I was really involved in the
Today's TRIO
multicultural
day.
students.
It sure is.
I should have said something in class.
They don't remember that name, TRIO.
Yeah, TRIO day. Big fan of TRIO. But it was interesting because I remember the exact moment I got assigned to Student Support Services counselor, and I was telling this counselor, like, I'm going to drop out. I'm going to go home. I don't think this Washington State University thing is for me. And then my counselor was like, well, before you do, you should go talk to Dr. Raymond Herrera. And I was like, okay, why should I do that? But I'm sure I'll go and talk to him. And so I talked to him, and he was just telling me about McNair. And I was like, that's the first time I really ever heard graduate school. And I was like, what is graduate school? Like there's like something that comes after undergrad. And so I was very green and like, I think that's just a function of, again, coming from a first generation background, being the first in my family to like go to school, let alone somewhere that is not in Hawaii. And, from there, it's kind of history from there. I started taking a lot of those classes, like, so my undergrad from my bachelor's degree from Washington State University is in sociology and women's studies, and I have a minor in psychology. And it wasn't until I started taking those classes and being mentored by the right professors who could relate to my cultural background, and my class background and all of those things, and who could help hold me and see me as like a holistic individual and not just like a number or a student. I think that's when I started to realize like, no, I do deserve to be on a college campus, you know, and I am smart enough to be here. And so, yeah, I think, you know, just like everybody else, McNair was my first exposure to research. And my McNair project was actually about perceptions of sexual harassment amongst STEM majors at Washington State University. And that's the first time I really ever thought of research as a way to come to a lot of answers and solutions to, I think, a lot of what our lived experiences as people of color, as women of color, and that there's actually power in knowledge and power in research. And so from there, I actually got a master's degree from also Washington State University in counseling psychology. Then I moved home, worked in the foster care system for a little bit. And, you know, as I was working with child welfare services, I did notice a lot of disturbing things, which was there's a high representation of certain populations in child welfare, and it didn't seem like anybody cared to stop and ask why, or how can we adapt our services to be more responsive to Native Hawaiian children, to Filipino children, to children who are obviously from low-income backgrounds. And I can thank McNair and my experiences at WSU for leading me to be able to ask those types of questions. And I became very frustrated with the system. I knew I couldn't work in social work for very long. I was just getting too burnt out. And so I left again to get my PhD in educational administration and policy. Big part of that reason is because I see education as one of the most powerful solutions to a lot of the persisting inequities that, you know, plague our society. So that was a huge shift for me. I went to University of Pittsburgh, so I can say I'm bi-coastal. I have that experience in Washington and in Pennsylvania. Yeah, that really shook me too. I actually, why University of Pittsburgh? To be completely honest with you, they were the only ones who offered me like a complete full ride. And so they paid for 100% of my education. And I had a fellowship with the Center of Urban Education there. The enriching part of that experience was that I met a lot of people who were doing a lot of great research in their own communities. And so I was the only one really focusing on a Hawaii and like a Native Hawaiian context, but a lot of my Black and Latinx colleagues, they were focusing a lot on the same issues except in their communities. And so I think my worldview really just like broadened. And it was always my intent to go home though. It was always my intent to go home and use my education to empower my own people and empower my own homelands. And so I moved home right before the pandemic, thank God, and finished my dissertation at home. And my dissertation focused on Native Hawaiian epistemologies or ways of knowing from a mana wahine, or a spiritually powerful women's perspective, and kind of like what is the persistent inequities that we see here on Kauai specifically, and what are some of the solutions from a Native Hawaiian women's perspective. So I took my research methodology was indigenous methodologies combined with community participatory action research. And it took me a while to do the dissertation for a lot of reasons, but one of the primary reasons it took me a while is because I realized that indigenous methodologies is not something that is very common in Western academia. It's still something that is very invalidated as real research or real science. And so a lot of my work was pushing back against that narrative and just digging through and like dispelling a lot of these systemic racism, honestly, in Western academia, and to really stand firm in that, like, my people here in Hawaii have, you know, the methodologies that we need, and we always had what we needed, and to like stand in that truth and that power. So anytime you go against the grain, I think in academia, it's always going to be swimming upstream. But I always, you know, one of my biggest advices to students doing research is that, like, you know what research you're called to do, you know what research you're supposed to be doing. And the more you fight it, the more extended your timeline will be, and the harder it is, it's going to be for you. So the easiest thing is to just accept your kuleana. That's what we call your responsibility, your privileges weighed with your burden, and just lean all the way into the struggle of trying to find, your place in the research world. And in academia, I really do believe that everybody's being called to do certain research for a reason, especially folks like McNair scholars. And so, yeah, finally, I graduated in 2021. And at that same time, before I even graduated, the Hawaii State Commission on the Status of Women and Office of Hawaiian Affairs called me, and they were like, we have this mandated research project about missing and murdered Native Hawaiian women, girls, Mahu, and we need a researcher for our task force. Will you be our researcher? And I was like, I didn't graduate yet, so I'm not a doctor yet. And I don't know, like, if you want me, I kind of like don't know what I'm doing. I was very honest. I hate to say this word because one of my strongest mentors, Manuelani Meyer, she says, every time a woman of color in academia says this word, an ancestor loses a feather off their wings. But imposter syndrome. So I had imposter syndrome for sure. I still do. All right. I think that's something we're gonna just live with for our life and keep pushing against. But accepted it, and I have been doing this research since 2021, and a lot of the same challenges that I experienced in my dissertation continue to exist now, except it's a lot more political. I always say that this topic is really, it's a topic that is unfortunately political. And it's political because of the race thing, because of, quite honestly, the funding that has to go behind it. Whenever I come up with a solution, there's always a lot of people in the state legislature and the Senate who all they think about is the money associated with implementing a solution, right? And so I'm in real time gathering a lot of experience with working with various stakeholders from state level to the federal level to the nonprofit level, to just like our regular ohana, our families, who are in our own community, who we know and love. And as a researcher, and a person, I'm extremely community based. So the truth that I ground in all of my research is the ones that come from the lived experience survivors themselves and the community themselves. And then we try to work with all the people who have the power to meet that need on the ground. And it's just a very research in a very power systems way has been very interesting. Yeah. That was a lot, but yeah, I can answer more questions about that later, but yeah, have more time for my co-panelists.
Thank you, Nikki. That was excellent. Yadi, what about you?
Okay, so I, like Nikki, went to Raymond's office, and I have always been very clear with anybody that would listen to me. I was like, I want to get out of school as soon as I can. I need to go make money, and I don't want to waste my time in school. And then I decided to get a PhD. So I don't know how that worked out, but Raymond kind of was like, yeah, like you should, join this program. It seems like, you want to get higher education. At the time, I wanted to be a school psychologist or school counselor. And I was like, for sure, I need a master's. I know that. I need help getting to a master's because I'm the first gen, don't even know what grad school was until like my junior year of college. So I was like, oh, I guess I need a master's and I need help figuring that out. And then I got exposed to McNair and I learned what research was. And I happened to find out that, WSU was kind of big into research. And I'm like, well, good thing I came to this school. So I got introduced to this amazing man. To this day, I am still very tight with him. He was my academic advisor, I guess my academic father, because he literally raised me from undergrad to master's to PhD. And even now, I got to do some postdoctoral work with him. And when I was in extension, I also worked with him, and his name was Tom Power. And he's retired now, but he's like the reason I think I survived grad school, because like Nikki, it was a huge culture shock. You can be like the smartest kid in your class, but then when you start, dealing with all the smart kids, you start feeling like you don't belong, and you start feeling like, you know, your parents keep asking you, when are you going to graduate? Why are you still in school? What do you do? Like, I'm just going to tell everybody you're a counselor. And that's what my mom would tell people, because she didn't know what to tell people when they asked me what I was still doing in school. And so, you know, I fell in love with research. He had an amazing, huge data set. And I, you know, saw an opportunity because, again, my goal was to get out of school as soon as possible with a PhD. So I used his research to the data set that he had to work on my thesis, which again was about how parent scaffolding affects children's relationship with their parents and how they cope. And then I worked on a grant with him. And we were able to fund my dissertation, which was developing a program to help Latina moms get skills to teach their children, their school-age children, how to cope with stress, and specifically them being a low-income background. And ultimately, I was a graduate assistant, which meant I got paid to do the research that I'm using for my thesis, to do the research that I'm using for my dissertation, and then to do what I love, which was working in my community. So I even got to move back to Prosser so I can work in the Tri-Cities area to implement these programs that were for the community I was really passionate about, which was, of course, the Latino community. And so I loved research. I really was passionate about community work. As soon as I graduated, and I graduated in 4 years because, you know, I piggybacked off of those data sets, and I was able to use all of this, you know, all of the stuff that I'm already getting paid to do. I was able to kind of work on my dissertation along with working for my mentor. And so I was able to do that. And then right away, I got a job in extension as a faculty. And it's a hybrid. It's kind of hybrid academic, hybrid community researcher. And it was great, but it just didn't fit me at the time. I think I was still exploring who I was and was still kind of figuring out, you know, what I wanted to do. Am I going to be this awesome researcher that's writing papers? Am I going to, you know, be out there doing community work, making those connections and getting and finding those gaps? And I just was having a really hard time, especially because I moved so fast in my academic career that I got great experience, but I just felt like I didn't have what I needed. So I got, hopped on with MSU, Michigan State University, and was able to take on this amazing research opportunity where I coordinated this multi-state evaluation for domestic violence survivors, and it's called Housing First. So pretty much we did this huge evaluation to see the domestic violence programs in different areas in Washington and California, implementing to see if they give money to survivors to get housing first before everything else crumbles down, how is that going to impact their ability to get out of their situation and their overall health outcomes for themselves and their children. And we got amazing data that helped change policy for domestic violence funding. And it was one of the best jobs I've ever had. But if you start writing, you know, if you start living in the academic world too long, you have to start chasing grants. And so I had to chase a different grant once that one was done. And I found another extension position and I tried it on. And again, it did not fit. And so I think after the second time where I decided, you know what, I think academic life is just not for me. And ultimately, it was just the balance of it all. And I kind of mentioned this before, where I was not able to turn my brain off when I was with my family. I was thinking research all the time, thinking about how I couldn't make it to that event, thinking about how I need to get recruitment done for this. And it was during COVID. So it was on top of that, I was kind of just trying to figure out a life of a lot of switching of how I learned how to do things right before COVID, and how I would recruit and how I would, write grants, and how we would just kind of plan things out to make sure that everything gets accepted, everything gets going. And then it's like a whole different world. And so it was a really hard time for me to kind of do that transition on top of being a new mom. So I was starting to feel kind of like, is this my identity? Is this who I am? I can't just switch. I mean, I got trained to be an amazing researcher, to work in my community. I can't just leave. I mean, what was all this super stress and hard work for? And so I made this huge transition to become a vocational counselor. And I think the first year was a little rough one for me because, again, there's this identity that I had that I would have pride when I would tell people, yes, I do community work. Yes, I work with the population. I'm doing this awesome research and talking about them. And then I went, to vocational work, which is, when people get hurt, I help them get back to work. I work with the lawyers, the doctors, the worker, and use evidence-based practices to get them back. But also, it's, kind of very cut and dry, and there's not a lot of wiggle room. So then I got introduced to whole evaluation of how to evaluate when someone can work. And that's where I kind of figured, okay, nothing is hopeless here. We can get people who are feeling hopeless, that they don't think they can go back to work, and kind of give them that hope back. So by either giving them opportunities to get retrained, working with their mental health providers to get them in a different mindset to see how they can go back to work, maybe not what they were doing before, but getting them motivated to do different things and set different goals. And so that was a way better balance for myself once I kind of got rid of that whole identity of, oh, I went to school for this, I need to do exactly what I went to school for, to no, I have skills to be able to convince anybody, even those lawyers that really don't want you to convince anybody. But I really feel confident that if I need to make an argument and need to use research or really, medical documents or, any kind of document I can use to back up what I'm going to try to fight for, which is usually my workers, right? And so I feel really empowered when I work with the monolingual community, because the Alumni system is not created for them, just like the higher academic system was not created for a lot of people of color. And so I just find myself like always wanting to be an advocate for just people, minorities that are in systems that we need to always be fighting for. And it's so good to have people that, went through this to help them, find those loops, find those ways to make them navigate them. And so yeah, I am very proud now. So not like I used to be like, I'm a voc counselor, but I am very proud to be a voc counselor. It is a different way of talking about what I do now, because it's so different from what I was doing. But it is a great way for me to apply the research, to apply the skills of writing papers, of fighting for people, advocating. So it's a good fit, and it fits for my family. So I get to set up my own appointments. I work when I want. I get to spend a lot of time with my kids. Sometimes it's nice. I like to have the days I don't spend time with my kids so I can work. So it's a really good balance. I really like it. And it's, it pays really good, a lot better than academia, I can tell you that right now. So yeah, I'm gonna let Rosie take it away. I think I talked plenty.
All right. Thank you, Yadi.
Thank you, Yadi. It's always nice to hear from you. So I think to talk about my academic and career trajectory, I just want to, start by saying that I am from Grammy, Washington, first generation college student, but at the core, I'm the daughter of Mexican farm workers. And so my whole life, from undergrad to graduate school to currently now, it's always been about, well, how do I document my life story, my community's life story? How do I honor their hard work, but also how do I honor their knowledge, our knowledge, right? The knowledge that we hold as a community, and how do I counter a lot of narratives that are told that are very demeaning, And so that's what my work and my life calling is, and will continue to be. So from, when I was an undergrad, I got my degree in sociology, and, as a McNair scholar, and my whole thing was like, I just want to help people. I want to learn, I want to understand. And so I think I really was able to find, start to find my voice through McNair and through research, to really kind of learn and understand, and also, focus in more on well, certain questions that I didn't ask about my family, about my history, about who I am, right? So I was able to do that, and then also think about farm workers' role in education. And I did that through the lens of parental involvement, to really kind of be like, well, parents are involved and they do so in these ways, right? And to really write about that. And then when I went to Berkeley to do my my PhD, which took me eight years, 8 very long years. It was an opportunity to really think more about, well, how can I write, our stories in a way that isn't just about, okay, well, in conversation with parental involvement, which is important, but for me, it was more, I want to be able to write a story and document life experiences in ways that honor knowledge. So, and honor it as valid forms of education. So I spent 8 years in graduate school, really doing a lot of thinking, taking, a lot of classes in Chicana feminism, ethnic studies, sociology, education. And so, really kind of drawing on various disciplines, thinking through what's been told, theoretically, but also in practice. I also gained really valuable experience working with my advisor for 2 years. She's an ethnographer, and I would go with her to an elementary school. And the project was, action-based, participatory, really trying to value Mayan Indigenous families' culture and language and embed it within the curriculum. And so I learned a lot from her. I learned, really how to think about these methodological practices, about how it is that we can work with and be with communities, right? Not just researching about. And allowing space for, in this case, Mayan Indigenous communities to, insert themselves in the research process, insert their knowledge and their culture and, their experiences, right? And so I learned a lot from this project. And it was, really foundational, and also thinking about how it is that I wanted to think about my own dissertation, right? And so my dissertation was about going back to my community to work with many of the women, my mother included, many campesinas, and to really kind of be with them and think about their life and think about how they work and live. And of course, think about their resistance strategies and document all of that, right? To document how it is that they're existing, how it is that they're coexisting in agriculture, working, but also how it is that they use agriculture as a space for learning. And so learning to be with each other, but also learning to be with their children and teaching them very valuable life lessons and, just so many things. And so I wrote a 300-page dissertation about that. And, also it was also an opportunity, like I mentioned earlier, to really think about my own role as a daughter of farm worker, but as a researcher who really wants to use research to tell stories, right? To really, find, communities to be with and to think together. And so that kind of brings me to my current position as a postdoctoral researcher. Although I'm not working with campesinas, I am learning more about action-based research and working with communities that also have so much knowledge, and youth in particular, which I think is really fulfilling, to be in high schools and be with youth who are so passionate about their life and about issues, and who use research at such an early, time to create some change in their communities. So it's such meaningful work to me. I'm very happy to be able to do this and be a part of it in this time. But I do plan to come back to my work with farm workers. And so, yeah, it's an ongoing project, right? To think about the skills that I can gain as I learn in my current position, but also to, I see myself as an academic, I see myself as a researcher, but to think about how I can do it in a way that is with others. So I'll stop there.
Outstanding. Thank you all very much. Wonderful stories. You all mentioned things that are on the minds of our current scholars who are thinking about pursuing a PhD, becoming a professional at some point. But they're kind of unsure what that life is like. You know, you mentioned I've heard a little bit of snippets or a few snippets about things, and things like autonomy and identity kind of came through. So share with us what it's like, being a professional. You're on the other side of the PhD now, being a professional with a PhD. What's your life like? Tell us some of that.
Interesting. But no, I mean, I think kind of like Yadi, I definitely thought, from as a McNair student in your position that I would eventually become a professor. Um, and I found out through my journey through the PhD, especially in my doctoral program, that I actually actually really don't like academia. And it's not the research part. It's not the teaching part. I actually love the research. I love the teaching. I'm good at grants. I'm all of that stuff, but it's just the politics of academia that I don't agree with. Um, and it's just the institutionalized racism that is so rampant in academia that I honestly can't stand. It's a publish or perish mentality, and the way the type of research, the way that the research I do, and the research that comes from a lot of indigenous and people of color faculty, especially those who use our own indigenous and communal based methodologies, like our research is not published as much, as people who use other more westernized research methodologies. And to me, it's just being raw with you. I feel like it's a lot of censorship. Um, and it's very corporate, right? Like I've realized, like, a lot of the professors who get tenure fast are the ones who bring in a lot of money, right? Through grants, through their research, that type of thing. And so I realized that I don't want to be in academia. I want to be in the community, and my choice to move home back here on Kauai was one that was a heavy choice. And the reason it was a heavy choice was because a lot of people were saying, you're not going to get a job here at a PhD with a PhD. You're going to be overqualified, and all the positions you do want. It's like this is a small community that I live in, and people live and die in their positions. And so there wasn't a lot out there, but I resisted that narrative because something in me told me that no, like the whole reason I got this PhD was to help my own community and my own people. So um, my trust for my community kind of outweighed my fear that I had for my own security. And so I did move back home. And, sometimes when you don't feel like you fit into any one world, you have to create your own. And so that's where a lot of where me establishing a community-based nonprofit came from. And I say anytime you do your work from a place of aloha, that place of genuine love and connectedness, then your opportunities are gonna open for you, So my problem is not what I feared it would be, that I wouldn't have a position at the community college or wouldn't have a position in the government or whatever. Like everybody wanted me to have a position in. It's more like I have too many opportunities, and so I have to say no to a lot of things. I'm always saying no to things, and it hurts me to say no because they're all great opportunities. And it's unfortunately still rare for people who come from what I come from, where I come from, to leave the island in the first place to get a higher education, let alone a PhD, but that's changing, and I'm very proud to be part of that change. And yeah, so I have a lot of autonomy in what I do. Um, I feel pretty empowered in what I do. I'm, like, even though, like, for this statewide report, even though I'm working with heavy systems, I'm working as an autonomous researcher. I'm contracted to do research, and I don't have to. I feel like for me, my freedom in what I research and how I research and how I choose to steward the stories and the voices of those in my community who are most harmed, I feel like that's all very much in my control to a certain extent. And so, yeah, to me, I mean, I value freedom and autonomy. So that's my everyday. Like Yadi said, I get to more or less make my own schedule, or I'm on community time, you know. um, and so I go where it is I'm needed, and I feel very grateful every single day for what I do. It's like very surreal, honestly. Like I never thought I would be in this position doing this type of work. And my work takes me all over the place. I go to every single island and talk to community members about their experiences with violence and what their solutions are. And I'm kind of that bridge in between of, you know, I think what happens when you go through McNair and you get a PhD, especially being from you know, a background that's more marginalized, is that you start to have all these different ways of knowing and these different ways of speaking that you can kind of, you know, we call it code switching, right? Like you can be in community and be a certain way, but then you can also know how to talk to people who are very much products of the system, right? And who are very like blinders on. I used to feel very oppressed by that. I used to feel very depressed by it, but now I see it as my biggest strength, you know? Um, so it's empowering to be that bridge between community and these power structures. Um, yeah, and I am Papa, I am pregnant. I'm giving birth in April. And so one of the biggest blessings of all is that you know, my work and my personal life, they're very intertwined, but in not in a way that I feel like is damaging to me or my baby or my family. It's in a way that, if anything, is empowering, you know. Like this baby is so loved by people from across Hawaii, you know, and even on the United States continent, and that's just by way of doing heart's work, you know. Um, and so yeah, I just feel very blessed and very grateful to be doing the work I'm doing, and know that a PhD, um, and as long as you're doing the work that's aligned with who you are, and what you're meant to be doing, there's going to be more opportunities than not. I wouldn't even worry about like not having a job, you know?
I want to piggyback off that. As someone who has gotten many jobs in a short amount of time, that is, finding a job's never been an issue for me, especially, you know, with a PhD. I always tell my husband that I am like the best con artist since getting like a PhD, because I can convince anyone how I can apply my skills for anything. Like I really feel like I can convince anyone to hire me as a medical doctor. Maybe, you know, I would start, you know, be able to get found out in a couple, but I would at least get the job and then they would find out, because I can convince anyone anything with the skills that I've obtained in knowing how to back up and use, you know, reliable sources and read data and kind of just like convince anyone what I need them to understand, right? And so I feel kind of like what Nikki said is I know how to communicate with the audience. I know how to code switch, and I think being a community research, you really code switch, because you have to be able to speak with individuals in the community and tell them like this is how this is going to benefit you, but also talk with, you know, the research crew and be like, but look, we still need this money and this is how we're going to use it and everyone's going to be happy. And so you're really, you know, you really kind of just putting on a show for everyone. And so I feel when I was starting in McNair, I think that was like, you know, Rosie and I were really close in our program, and we would talk about like, how are we gonna get a job? Like, how are we, you know, what are we gonna do? I don't want to do this. And we would just go back and forth on this. And then, you know, getting a PhD, it's just, there's so many things you can do. You have to be a little bit more creative when looking for jobs. And but I've never had an issue like, you know, they say we want someone with this credential, and as soon as you put a PhD, you can say, oh, you need this much years of experience. Well, I did this many years of research and I did this under this project. Especially when you're in grad school, if you're doing, you know, if you're a research assistant or you're a teaching assistant, you're getting so many different skills and opportunities that you can use that as training for, you know, a future position in any aspect, whether it's going to teaching, whether it's working with people, whether it's managing. You're managing so many things just by being a grad student. And so there's so many things, so many skills that you don't understand you're building until you're out of there and you're like, whoa, I know how to do all of these things. And one big thing too, that I kind of really wish I understood is you're developing your own identity in grad school. And something I really struggled with was like, I was in a high anxiety mindset. Like I was just like, I have all of these things to do. I have to read all these things. I have to get all this work done. And I was kind of just like on survival mode. And once I got out of that survival mode, I started realizing that I got some skills, but I still haven't found what I love. And then I started kind of exploring and applying to different jobs that I started feeling more drawn to. And finally, I found what I loved. And so I think it's really important when you are feeling overwhelmed is you remind yourself why you're doing it. Because if you're just there just to get those 3 little letters in the end of your name, I think you're going to go through, some kind of depression in the end of it because it's very anticlimactic. You're going to defend that dissertation and you're going to wait for a parade, and there's no parade, guys. I've been waiting and I'm still, haven't gotten the parade. But in the end, you can make little tiny parades when you start seeing that for when you advocated for a worker, or, you found a job for someone that they really thought they were never going to work in their lives, but you were able to make sure that they find meaning, right, in their life. And so you get those little parades in different ways. But when you're in it and you feel like it's going to be worth it, I'm just going to survive grad school and then it's going to be easy. I don't ever think it gets easy, but you start finding like those motivations that keep you going. And so if your motivation is, I just like the idea of getting a PhD, I don't think it's going to make you very happy. But if your motivation is like, I want to change something, I want to see people, make these huge policy changes, or I want more people that look like me to be in education, or I want to help people navigate this system or something, then yeah, you're in it where you're pursuing something that I think is worth it. It's really hard, but it's worth it because you're going to have a set of skills that you can apply in so many different areas. So yeah.
Well, so my experience in my current position is different than that of Nikki's and Yadi's in the sense that I'm still a postdoc in training in some sense, right? So I don't have the same flexibility. I want to get there. That would be great, right? I think one of the reasons why, I took this postdoc instead of going into the job market, doing academia or independent research or consulting, is I feel like I've always taken a very traditional path in academia, and it just felt like something I needed to do, this postdoc, so I can say that, I can get additional training, I can, gain more skills in participatory action research. My goal is, what if I don't do academia, I still want to do research. So just finding that for me would be really important. So I think flexibility is a big part in the decision that I'm going to do post, postdoc. My next steps, I'll be here for 2 to 3 years. So it's still, me kind of feeling things out, seeing what direction I want to take. But like my day-to-day as a postdoc, for those of you, curious about what a postdoc is and what it, there are many postdocs and they differ by discipline. But mine being in education and being very, hands-on, there's the practice, right? That, we are on the ground working with teachers, but then there's also the research. So documenting what's happening, collecting the data, and also, sharing what we're finding, right? So day-to-day tasks, I'll be in meetings, with the team. I'll be, in meetings with teachers. I will be conducting school site visits. I'll be, working from home sometimes, working on the resources creating these lesson plans for teachers, or, meeting with teachers to create lesson plans, right? To co-create lesson plans. So we'll be kind of back and forth. I'm also part of the team that Center for Urban Education as a team. There's a couple of us. There's a director, graduate students, other faculty, and we're publishing papers. And one of the big things that is important to me is to make sure that teachers and students are part of the publishing. So I'm working with teachers currently to write papers with them. So we just submitted to a journal article, and teachers wrote their own kind of narrative and experience documenting, their experience implementing research in their classroom. So that's really important to me, and that's something that is also part of the postdoc that I'm a part of. And there is some independent time. So I also am still kind of thinking through my own independent research, thinking of, reading articles, thinking about ideas. Whatever I do here as in the postdoc, I'm always connecting it to my interests. I'm learning more about PAR, reading articles on participatory action research, staying up to date on theories around Chicana feminism, which is something that, one of the fields that I situate myself in. So things like that. It's both very much academic, scholarly writing, but also on the ground practice, working with communities. In terms of maintaining a work-life balance, for me, it's like I'm putting in my hours. And once I put in my hours, I'm done. I like to spend time with my family, with my daughter, my husband, my dog. We try to stay really active. We try our best to get outdoors. There's so much nature here that, we try our best to go to take a walk, sledding. We just went sledding this weekend because it snowed very briefly over the weekend. So yeah, I think for me, one of the things that has really helped is in creating this work-life balance is anytime that I'm feeling off, or my mental health is just kind of feeling really low, and I try to prioritize my well-being and my health. So I will exercise, I will spend more time with my daughter, having moments of joy, right, is really important. So, and I am unapologetic about that. It's like, if something has to give, it's going to be my work. My mental health is important and my family's important, and I prioritize that very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, our time is about up. I do want to give each of you an opportunity to share some final thoughts with us. And so we'll go ahead, we'll go one more round, and then we'll say our goodbyes.
Just mahalo. Thank you for having me. Ray has my contact information. So if anybody wants to reach in with me and have any questions, or just want to talk story with me further, if I can be of any assistance, let me know. I would love to answer any questions, or just get to know you all. The only reason I'm in the position I am today is because I had support from people who have been on similar trajectories before. So just know that McNair is an ohana, it's a family. I have a lot of my success. I have McNair to thank for a lot of my success. So yeah, I'm here for you all.
Yes, ditto to what Nikki said. Absolutely. Something that I did want to end with is, when you think things are just too hard, where you're like, this professor hates me, they are just jerks, and they're just giving us work. No, it's all for a reason, because when there's been times where I'm like, wow, they're just trying to torture us. This is just academic hazing, and I absolutely hate it. Then it comes time that you are doing your your oral examinations and prelims and all of these things, and you just start realizing that everything was for a reason. You are prepared. And I remember specifically in McNair, Mary, she would make us read so many things. We even told on her to Raymond, and we were like, she's making us read too many things. And he was like, yeah, you're in McNair, shut up. And so just know that things are hard because it is to teach you how it's going to be in grad school. You are balancing so much, you are reading so much, and you are just developing skills, like even without you knowing it, because it's hard, but it's because you're learning, and things aren't easy when you're learning. So
Yeah, thank you all. So I think my kind of takeaway is to be patient with yourself and to trust yourself in your journey. My journey has been very long, but it's because I've tried my best to have a life as I go through the process. I really do. I had my daughter when I was in graduate school. I try to take trips. I try to visit my family, right, in Grandview, Washington. I really do. I exercise. Like, there's things that I just need to do in order to make it through. And my family, my mental well-being, and my health are so important. And I make sure that that's a priority. So as you're going through this very challenging PhD journey, or thinking of going through this very challenging PhD journey, remember to always be patient with yourself and to trust yourself in this journey.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Cristobal, Dr. Oliveira Guerrero, Dr. Godinez. It warms my heart to have you come back, to be able to call you doctors, doctoras is fantastic. You've all contributed so much to our program here at WSU and to our larger TRIO community. You are beacons of hope for us. And I talk about you folks all the time whenever I can, to our current students, to administrators, what have you, as the example. You're living the TRIO dream. So thank you so much for all that you do. Continue to do it, and please come back, and visit with us, whether it be virtually or in person. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon for our first National TRIO Day celebration for WSU. If you want to join us for the rest of the week, we sure hope that you can. Again, thank you, Nikki, Yadi, Rosie. It's great to see you, and happy TRIO Day to everyone. Take care.
Thank you all.
Okay, thank you, folks. Appreciate it. That was awesome.
Thank you, Raymond. Good seeing you.
Yeah, you too. Take care. We'll be in touch soon.
Be in touch.
Bye-bye.
Bye.